Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, Vigilant for Peace Abroad and Terror at Home. All brought to you in partnership with our good friends at the Association for Mature American Citizens, better known as AMAC. All throughout tonight's show, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the critical issues facing America's foreign policy and domestic security, and in many cases, they are deeply tied to one another. We'll explore how the U.S. can maintain peace abroad while addressing the growing threats of foreign influence here in America. An example being a lot of the anti-ICE and anti-Israel protests, as well as the threat of terrorism here at home due to the Biden administration's previous wide-open borders. We've seen President Trump's national security strategy in action. It's been put to the test, but it's also succeeding, whether in Iran or here in America. But according to the White House, the approach is strengthening America's global standing and protecting the homeland at the same time. We'll break that down all throughout tonight with the incredible lineup of guests we have, starting with former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren. He'll break down and give us a live report of what's going on in the Middle East in the first 24 hours of that historic ceasefire. We'll also have House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith discussing congressional efforts to support national security priorities, like where the dark money funding all these protests is coming from, and can it be stopped by Congress? We'll get to that. Then retired CIA officer Sam Faddis will join us to provide insight into the evolving threats of terrorism on American soil and what can be done to counter them. And China expert Gordon Chang will be here to analyze the geopolitical challenges posed by China and what the CCP is doing at home to foment arrest on that topic. Today we had some news, more details about what the FBI knew about China's plot to disrupt the 2020 election. Go check that out at justthenews.com. Finally, we'll wrap the conversation up today with former Assistant Secretary of State and candidate for governor of Maine. He's also the national spokesman for AMAC, Bobby Charles, our good friend. He'll discuss the balance between maintaining global influence and protecting American citizens at home. Now, before we get to all that, let me introduce my amazing co-host for the evening. She's also my good friend and the CEO of AMAC, Rebecca Weber. Rebecca, great to have you back. This is a great lineup today. Big discussions we're going to have.
Sure is, John. It's great to be with you tonight. And, you know, I will say this, that America is safer today than we were just a handful of weeks ago.
That's true.
I think Donald Trump's strategy of peace through strength is working. And I'm very excited to have this great lineup because we've got a lot of questions. People are concerned about what's happening here, our own domestic security, and they're concerned about what this means across the globe. So interesting, great lineup that we have, and very excited to say that AMAC is growing over 2 million AMAC
It's
members.
amazing.
I love that
I'm
you're
one of them.
promoting
I'm
the
a card
special.
carrying member and very proud of it.
That's
yeah.
terrific. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
I love the offer we have tonight. I think it's $12 for a year. That's an amazing deal. We'll mention that several times throughout the show. You mentioned feeling stronger and safer, and I think watching President Trump at NATO today and seeing all those NATO countries saying, yeah, we'll chip in our 5%. Now, you were right, Mr. President. It really was an amazing moment for not just the president, but America, I think.
That's absolutely right. And each and every one of those leaders really ought to be thanking our president, because without his strength, this is something that I don't believe that Joe Biden or any other leader for that matter would have had the courage to execute in such a way. So very, very pleased to see that he is continuing to work for us, the American people, and recognizing that America first is the best priority for all Americans. We want this country to be great today and into the future and for future generations.
That's the thing.
That's so important.
Things are happening today. They're going to secure a better America for our children and grandchildren.
That's exactly
which is
right.
remarkable. That's what AMAC stands for, which I love about it so much. It's great. All right, we're going to start tonight with a very exciting guest, a live report of what's going on in the Middle East, where President Trump has reshaped the landscape very quickly with that B-2 bomber attack this weekend and now the ceasefire with Iran. Our first guest is going to give us a live report. All right, we're very lucky to kick off tonight's show with the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, one of the most trusted voices all across this world, Ambassador Michael Oren. Mr. Ambassador, good to have you on.
Good to be back, John. Rebecca, hi. Good to be with you.
Great to have you on, sir. I know you've been ducking bombs. I know Israel has been in this extraordinary, intense moment. What have the last 24 hours since the ceasefire took hold been like, and what is the outlook for that ceasefire holding?
Well, first of all, relief. This country was under tremendous duress for 12 days, in and out of our safe rooms, which are basically bomb shelters in our house, hearing about the missiles coming over, the whole building shaking as they hit, and hit not far from where I'm talking to you, and people getting killed, great numbers of people getting wounded, and tremendous uncertainty about the past. Much of that was relieved decisively when President Trump decided to intervene militarily, Operation Midnight Hammer joining our Operation Rising Lion. By the way, the first time in Israel's history in 77 years where the United States has actively participated with us in a counteroffensive operation. The United States has defended Israel's skies many times in the past, but never joined us in an operation against a common enemy, and so effectively, immensely effectively. That's operations will be studied at West Point for the next 100 years. But also, along with the last day and a half of quiet and relief, uncertainty about the future. What does this ceasefire look like? What will be America's position should Iran violate that ceasefire in various ways if it tries to rebuild its nuclear program? And what will be America's position in the negotiations, which are set to revive soon? And meanwhile, we're still dealing with the situation in Gaza, where last night 7 young Israeli soldiers were killed.
Yeah, we're praying for Israel. Sir, you have lived, you've served, you've negotiated on both sides of the U.S.-Israeli relationship. What concerns you most about the growing ideological divide within America regarding support for Israel, especially with younger voters within the Democratic Party?
Well, what concerns me most, what may surprise you, that they almost without exception, people who don't like Israel, don't want a relationship with Israel, don't think Israel should have a right to exist, those people almost unexceptionally believe that the United States doesn't necessarily have a right to exist either. They don't like their own country. And I think that's a deeper problem. It's a deeper problem when you have an elite that doesn't think that the country's worth fighting for, worth defending, is not proud of its achievements. So it's a deeper problem. Israel will continue to have strong relations, I think, with the American people. Once we get past this war, certainly we'll begin to restore some of those relationships. But the source of anti-Israel feeling among young people in particular comes overwhelmingly from social media and from the universities themselves. And I think that's a much deeper problem, Rebecca.
It certainly is. We've seen these violent protests. They're erupting in American cities over the Israeli-Gaza conflict. Do you see signs of foreign influence, especially from Iran or these proxy groups really shaping the narratives and exploiting America's internal divisions?
Well, we know from captured documents that the Qatari has been involved in giving money to support this type of activity. The captured documents we have from Hamas in Gaza talks about how much Hamas was coordinated with some of the organizations sponsoring these protests. It's just very interesting. You go to campus, and campus, it's the same green tents, it's the same flags. Someone's providing all that wherewithal for these protests, even busing people in. They're very well funded, and the question remains: okay, who's given the money?
Yeah, it is. Follow the money. We'll have that answer. That's got to be an important part of the U.S. Focal point. So I want to talk a little bit about the success that the Israeli military had. I don't think anybody could imagine that Iran's air defenses would be disabled so quickly. Both the U.S. bombers and the Israeli fighter jets have had complete reign of the skies the last 6 or 7 days. How much planning and how much preparation went into this extraordinary operation? It seems like you knew where every air defense battery was.
And every high-ranking IRGC official and every senior nuclear scientist, along with that, years in the planning. I mean, I was ambassador 10 years ago, and the planning was going on there, and probably more intensely, certainly in the last year and a half, that planning has gone into action. It's really it defies the imagination, John, that the Mossad, our equivalent of the CIA, was able to establish actually a base inside Iran for launching explosive drones that work with very damaging effect. And we did know. We know where the missiles were. We knew where the launches were. We destroyed something in the order of about 50% of their missile launching capacity, about 80% of their actual missiles. So again, in purely military terms, this was an extraordinary historic accomplishment. And the question is, can it be translated into a permanent strategic victory? Now, I think for the United States, if I may say, it is already a strategic victory because the United States is back after now many years in the aftermath of Iraq and Afghanistan, where tremendous opposition to use of military force by many segments of the American people. The United States is back not just as an economic power, but as a military power. And I think there are people in Beijing who are thinking twice about, attacking Taiwan tonight. I think you'll agree with me, Rebecca and John. So that in itself is an extraordinary strategic accomplishment. But for Israel, we have to come through this war assured that Iran will not threaten us in the same way again. that opportunities for peace will open up through the entire Middle East. That, for example, Lebanon, which was basically a colony of Iran for the last several decades, will gain its independence and can make peace with us. Syria, another Iranian colony, is now free, can make peace with us. That we can find a solution to the Gaza imbroglio. All of this can happen right now if diplomacy is used prudently and effectively, particularly by the United States.
Yeah, and we've heard some lawmakers openly calling for a regime change in Iran. Now, do you think that a rapid regime change in Iran could cause more harm than good, especially at this point in time? Could we find ourselves in a similar situation like we saw in Iraq when we left a power vacuum?
I often hear this now, Rebecca, that the lessons of Libya and Iraq, what happened in Libya too, there was chaos after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. There's a tremendous difference here. One, first of all, both Iraq and Libya were creations of the Europeans. They were created in the 20th century by European colonialism. There was never historically a country called Libya, nor historically a country called Iraq. Iran has been around for thousands of years. It is a nation state. There is an Iranian people, and the Iranian people have tremendous internal coherence. And unlike Iraq and Libya, where the government fell as a result of military pressure, and the United States basically went into state making in Iraq, the changes in Iran, should they come, will come from the people themselves and not from any external forces. I don't think you can change a government through military means alone. Now, the people in Iran, many of them hate this regime. It is corrupt, it is ineffective. It has spent billions and billions of dollars supporting terror, building a nuclear program that nobody needs, by the way. Iran is one of the great exporters of oil. They don't need nuclear energy. By the way, nuclear energy costs about 40 times more than oil energy. That's the last thing they need. So the people are furious, and they've had it. The question is, can they organize? Are there elements in the army, for example, that are ready to rise up? We don't know, and I wouldn't count on it from today to tomorrow. I cannot believe this regime is going to be around in another 5 years, but okay. We said the same thing back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. We don't know, but let's assume that the same regime is going to come to the negotiating table. We hope, and I say we, I'm not representing the country, but I sure all Israelis hope that America will demand an end to Iran's enrichment of uranium. It will demand the dismantlement of those facilities, nuclear facilities that haven't been dismantled already, and an end to Iranian support for terror. They are the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. They've tried to assassinate the president, tried to assassinate a former Secretary of Defense and National Security Advisor, tried to assassinate yours truly in Washington some years back. As you see, they didn't succeed. But all that has to end.
Yeah. So we got about a minute left real quickly. There's a debate in America. How much did we really set back the Iranian nuclear program? Early assessments are often the least accurate, and over time we get greater precision. But from the Israeli perspective, how successful were the B-2 bomber attacks and the pre-work that Israel did, and how much do you think Iran has been set back in its nuclear ambitions?
Our assessment is that Iran has been set back for years, and the damage was very extensive indeed. We are satisfied with the damage, extent of the damage. The question is, what degree has Iran's motivation for creating nuclear weapons, its taste for nuclear weapons, has it been dampened at all? And can the United States, through diplomacy, through hard-knuckled diplomacy, with a credible military option remaining on the table, can it then get the Iranians to say, okay, we're going to take a different course, we're going to be a different country, and perhaps realize, strangely enough, I'll quote President Obama. President Obama hoped that one day Iran would be a quote-unquote responsible regional power. Well, bring it on. We'd like to see it.
Yeah, that would be a welcome change after 50 years of unresponsible and violent behavior. Ambassador Oren, it's always a great honor. You're one of my favorite authors on top of all the great work you do as a diplomat, but a great honor to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, John.
Yeah, great conversation. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but I'll tell you what, we got some big stars coming up right again. House Ways and Means Chairman Jason Smith will join us right after the break. And while you're in the break, I want to give you a little bit of a homework assignment. I want you to go to amac.us/justnews, because you can join right now for as little as $12 for the whole year. You don't get anything for $12 anymore. You'll get all the great benefits of being an AMAC member for only $12, and you'll help get AMAC push conservative causes that you care about. That's amac.us/justnews. Go check it out in the break. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, Vigilant for Peace Abroad and Terror at Home. It's all brought to you in partnership with our good friends at the Association for Mature American Citizens, or AMAC. I'm still joined in studio by AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber. She's my co-host for the evening. And we're now going to be joined by the chairman of the man at the center of the big, beautiful bill, the House Ways and Means Committee Chairman, Jason Smith. Sir, good to have you on the show.
It's always great to be with you, John, Rebecca.
Really great to have you with us, sir. First question I have for you is, there are so many rising concerns really about national security from the threats due to wide open borders under Joe Biden, and we see growing aggression from China, Russia, and Iran. How is Congress really ensuring that taxpayer dollars are being prioritized, that we're spending that money here to defend our homeland rather than really funding, foreign entanglements or wasteful domestic spending?
That's exactly what is the foundation, Rebecca, of the One Big Beautiful Bill that passed out of the House that's over in the Senate. When you look at that legislation, it provides the largest one-time investment in border security, in looking at the immigration issues. It also creates increased funding in protecting Americans by the Golden Dome that is within the One Big Beautiful Bill. Most people think of the One Big Beautiful Bill as the largest tax cut in U.S. history that delivers permanency of Trump's tax cuts and no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and tax relief for seniors. It does all that, but it also does the additional items, and that's why it has its title, One Big Beautiful Bill. But it also cuts more spending in one package than ever before in the history of Congress.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, pretty amazing. So I want to ask a little bit about the status of what's going to come back from the Senate. Your thoughts on how it's shaping up in the Senate, what you think you'll get back, and is it possible to get something through the House in the next couple of weeks?
We absolutely are going to get this through. The president has called and asked for it to be on his desk by July 4th. I believe that Congress should deliver that. We passed the bill over 6 weeks ago. It's been over in the Senate for a while. It's go time. This week, they need to pass the bill, send it back, but they need to carefully thread the needle. I've said all along to my counterparts on the other side of the building, you have to have balance. You can't go too far in any one direction because we have a razor-thin majority. In the House of Representatives, I can only lose 1.4% of my colleagues. In the Senate, they can lose 6% of their colleagues to pass a bill. So this bill passed the House 215 to 214. They have to use balance in threading that needle.
And speaking of threading that needle, our President Trump seems to be doing a very good job really bringing peace. And we saw what happened just a few days ago in Iran. Here in America, we understand that there is or could be foreign funding, foreign interference, or foreign influence as it relates to unrest that we're seeing across cities, including LA. Do you have any information that might suggest or point to that, in fact, a lot of that unrest is funded by foreign interests?
This is something that we have been researching at the Ways and Means Committee for over a year now. In fact, I have called for 11 different non-for-profits to have their tax-exempt status reviewed and revoked. Unfortunately, during that time frame, we have had numerous IRS commissioners go in and out. We're currently on the 6th one in the last 6 to 9 months, but I am so thrilled that this is the first one that is President Trump's confirmed pick. Congressman Billy Long, my former colleague from the state of Missouri, and I look forward to kind of looking at these different non-for-profits that we have pointed out that has been funneling money to terrorist organizations, but also that have been funding money to create discontent and unrest, whether it's on college campuses or whether it's on the streets or protesting against ICE or obstructing against ICE. They need to be held accountable. That is not their tax-exempt status fulfillment. And so I think the IRS should eliminate their tax exempt status.
Yeah, that's going to be a big moment. And now with a new commissioner, they're empowered to do so, hopefully. So I want to turn to something you mentioned, because I do think it's one of those big investments that a lot of Americans don't fully understand yet. We saw how the dome over Israel has played such a big role in saving lives. President Trump wants to create that golden dome here. That's one of the big investments in this bill. Talk a little bit about the threat that we face from our skies above and why the golden dome is so important at this moment in American history.
Well, you see exactly the protections that Israel has with their dome. United States should definitely have it. I think for the security of all Americans. You just look at Iran, for example. Iran has been saying for years, death to America. And there's a lot of other folks out there that don't like the United States. And so we need to protect our homeland first and foremost. And the Golden Dome will do that. It will actually protect most of Canada and Mexico as well, too. So it would definitely protect North America.
Now, under Joe Biden, we saw wide open borders, so many gotaways, millions of people in America that should not be here. How concerned should the average American be about potential sleeper cells right here in America?
You know, it's unfortunate. We've had over 20 million that we know of illegals that had crossed the southern border in the 4 years of the Biden administration. They just allowed anyone and everyone to come through. And we don't know. We don't know all those individuals. We don't know how many terrorists came through. And so every American should be mindful and pay close attention, because you don't know what might be out there. Because unfortunately, I've been to the southern border numerous times during the Biden administration, and I would talk to those Border Patrol agents, and they would tell me that they would have hundreds of people from hundreds of different countries that were not connected to, that bordered us or was part of our hemisphere. They were from the Middle East, they were from China, they were from Asia, Africa, all over. And they just were able to come across the southern border.
On the world stage, do you see that Hamas and Hezbollah have been severely weakened? Do you think that Iran's ability to really create unrest has been weakened severely?
There is no question, without a doubt, they have been weakened beyond imagination, and we're grateful for that. Because of that, the world is a safer place.
Amen.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Sir, before we let you go, I just want to ask a little bit about what happened in Africa. It hardly had time to get into the news with everything else that's going on, but 30 plus years of war between Congo and Rwanda has been brought to an end. A peace agreement going to be signed on Friday. In that region, there's an enormous amount of vast minerals. I know China will be trying to get their hands on it, but the U.S. brokering this deal, is that an enormous opportunity for us to get much needed commerce going so that we can continue our AI revolution in America with those minerals?
Absolutely. I think Africa as a continent in general is one that America needs to engage in aggressively, because there's numerous minerals, critical minerals, rare earths that we need. And we need to make sure that China is not raping their homeland, and we need to protect it, but preserve it, and also work with them so it can be mutually beneficial for both the United States and Africa as a continent altogether. So it will only be helpful moving forward with this peace agreement.
And there's a trade deal between us and Africa that I think expires at the end of the year. I know your committee's working on that. Do you think that that has a chance of coming back in some form by the end of the year?
Yeah, that's AGOA.
Yep.
It expires the end of September, and it's something that we have been working on. I've been working with the administration. We want to make sure that it's done right, because we want to have those appropriate trade preferences with these countries that can be very, very beneficial for us when it comes to the rare earths and critical minerals.
Yeah, what an enormous opportunity. What an enormous portfolio, sir, that's on your plate right now as the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Great honor to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, John. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, great conversation. We always learn so much when you're on. Thanks so much. All right, folks, we're going to take another commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk to former CIA officer Sam Faddis about what our intel agencies are and aren't doing to stop foreign dark money from bankrolling protests and other things trying to stabilize America. But before we go to break, I got a homework assignment. please go to amac.us/justnews. Sign up for a year of AMAC membership. Join me. I'm a 5-year card-carrying member. You can get a membership for as little as just $12 a year. Support the fight for change in Washington, D.C., and you can do it for just $12 by going to amac.us/justnews. That's amac.us/justnews. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, Vigilant for Peace Abroad and Terror at Home. It's all brought to you by our good friends at AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. I'm here with AMAC CEO and my good friend, Rebecca Weber, and we have another great guest. He's been on the front lines of security for most of his life. He's the former CIA officer and good friend of this show, Sam Faddis. Sam, good to have you on.
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
All right, we've had this moment of reprieve after the extraordinary B-2 bombings this weekend that bombed, I guess, Israel into a ceasefire. What is your outlook when you look out over the next several days? What do we think is going to happen in the Middle East and then here at home as well?
Well, I think the key here is that for the Iranians, anyway, the fact that they've agreed to a ceasefire means they want a breather. In common terms, they let me up off the mat, let me catch my breath, and let me regroup. So that doesn't mean that necessarily anything's over. And when and if they resume, they'll resume on their terms and on their time schedule and in the way they choose to. So yeah, that could happen in a couple of days, but the fact that it doesn't happen in a couple of days doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And however it happens, it'll be where they think they've got the advantage when they respond.
Yeah.
And with this recent degradation of terrorist groups that are funded by the Iranian regime, is the threat here at home in America significantly diminished? Are threat levels down?
Well, I mean, I think it helps, but the fact is if they decide to flip the switch, I'm still very concerned. You've seen recently that Homeland Security and the FBI have been arresting Iranians who are here, as far as I'm concerned, illegally, who have backgrounds, connections to the military, stuff that makes them of significant interest. I think that's a good start. I mean, it can't hurt, and these folks are here legally. They should go home anyway.
Yeah.
But when the real operatives come, or should I say when they activate the real operatives, it won't be a guy who came here in his true name and told you that he used to be a sniper in the Iranian military. It'll be a guy with false identity documents, using a fake name and a fake background, who knows his business and who has been trained very highly. And finding those guys and catching them is a whole different game.
Yeah. Now, how vulnerable, in your view, is the United States to asymmetric warfare? Especially with the geopolitical landscape, and are we adapting fast enough to counter it?
Yeah, I think unfortunately we are very vulnerable, and are we adapting fast enough? No, I mean, with all due respect for everybody in law enforcement, great men and women who are risking their lives every day. If you're going to prevent the Iranian Quds Force and associated, MOIS, Iranian intelligence, and all their affiliates and all their allies, like the Venezuelans and the Cubans and everybody else, if you're going to stop them from conducting operations on U.S. soil, that's going to take something at the national level with a real counterintelligence focus. The tradecraft of these folks is very, very good, and just finding them is going to be hard. And I'm not sure the FBI has cracked the code on how to do that.
Yeah, that's a concern, and I've heard that from other folks. I think that is a real concern. So we've known about these, particularly Hezbollah, sleeper cells, and Hezbollah, really some of the best trained of the terrorists in the world. Talk about some of the tactics you knew they were training for when you were back in the CIA. I know backpack bombs. Now I guess they probably have drones. What are some of the things that we might look for if they do get activated by the Iranian regime?
What you're going to find is that they case their targets a long time ago. They don't get an order from above and then start coming up with a plan. They were out. I mean, they've been out. We've documented this for 25 years, right? They case the Empire State Building. They case other landmarks. That means photographs, sketches. And then they put together caches. They store explosives and weapons in advance. So, and what are they looking to carry out when they are told to do so? Mass casualty events. Doesn't have to be a suicide vest kind of attack, a vehicle bomb, that kind of thing. You're not talking about, you're talking about something that in their terms will make a splash, will make an impact. And that's a horrible way to look at it, but that's the way they look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
As we know, the effectiveness of our agencies was compromised under Joe Biden's leadership, that is. Now, has the politicization of U.S. intelligence compromised our ability to respond quickly and effectively to these foreign threats? And what reforms might you advocate for?
Yeah, it compromised absolutely. I mean, in the case of the CIA, if you're a case officer, which is what I was, what everybody would call a spy, and in normal language, how you actually do your job, which is defined as tradecraft, became number 7 on the list of priorities for promotion under Biden. So way after your dedication to DEI and all sorts of other kinder, gentler, fuzzier things, the can you do your job factor almost irrelevant on the list of priorities. And many of the senior people at CIA, and I'm just using that as an example because that's where I work, many of the senior people at CIA now are not really operational personnel. I mean, they may technically have gone to a course once, but they have not spent careers in the field. So, you're looking at an organization, and this is true in many other places, that has lost its edge. Can we get it back? Yeah, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's another thing I think brewing on the horizon, and that is a growing distrust between President Trump and the current intelligence analysts who provide him the daily briefings, such as the assessment of how much bomb damage occurred at Fordo and the other things. Talk a little bit about that dynamic. Trump's always been dubious of the intelligence community. He's clearly dubious of the deep state that tried to set him up. How does a president navigate that distrust to get actionable intelligence still that allows him to make the best decisions for America?
Well, he should distrust them, right? I mean, they did try to depose him, prevent him from getting into office and so forth. And I get it why he is very dubious, because honestly, many of the intel briefings he's getting right now are so generic and so watered down that it's like, look, if I read the newspaper, I could have written that for you. What he's supposed to be handed is, the crown jewels, the kind of intel that nobody else on the planet has, that gives him a critical advantage, and he's not getting that. In my opinion, he's not going to get that without significant personnel changes. Just putting a director in and a number 2 in at CIA, and again, I use that only as an example, does not mean you are now in control of the whole apparatus. You're going to have to fire a whole bunch more people.
Yeah, they may be missing valuable time because there hasn't been a ton of firings yet. Sam Faddis, we always enjoy your insights. You did the craft so well, and we're grateful you're on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, great conversation as always. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, China expert Gordon Chang, one of my good friends, he'll be here to explain what the CCP is doing to destabilize America and what we can do to stop it. And while we're in a break, it's the perfect opportunity to go over to amac.us News and take advantage of that incredible offer that Rebecca and her team has put out there. $12 for a year. What a great deal. You'll get all the great benefits of being an AMAC member and help support the causes that you care about all around the country, all for just $12. It's such a great deal. Go join me, become an AMAC member today. amac.us/justnews. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, Vigilant for Peace Abroad and Terror at Home. It's brought to you by our good friends at AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. I'm here in studio tonight with AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber. She's my co-host for the evening in this great conversation. We're going to turn our attention towards China because we know the CCP is running all kinds of schemes to destabilize our country here. At home, joining us now, the author of the book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. He's one of the country's greatest experts when it comes to China, our good friend, Gordon Chang. Gordon, good to have you here.
Thank you very much, John and Rebecca.
Heck, so much has happened in the last few weeks, but I think the big line that a lot of people aren't considering, we think of Iran and the context of the Middle East, but there is a big component for China being a loser in what we've done with Iran.
There's so many things going on. So, for instance, Iran would never have been able to prosecute the war against Israel October 7th were it not for Chinese support. You know, China takes more than 90% of Iran's exports of crude oil, but Iran's own weapons are made with Chinese microchips. Iran has large quantities of Chinese weapons, as do Iran's three main proxy groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi militia. So China's all over this. And of course, there's diplomatic support, propaganda support, and targeting data that China supplies, for instance, to the Houthis, who use it against the U.S. Navy.
Amazing. Crazy.
Thank you so much, Gordon. I wanted to ask you, what do you see as the single greatest threat, the security threat here in America? What are we facing? What are we up against? And why aren't more Americans aware of it?
I guess the single greatest threat would be the Chinese, Iranian, and Russian networks of operatives in our country. We know that with the open border, thousands, tens of thousands of Chinese came, most of them desperate Chinese wanting to live in a free society, but also, especially towards the end of the Biden administration, there were a lot of packs of Chinese males coming in from groups of 4 to 15, and we saw them with identical kit. Now, with this, there was the uptick in tempo of incursions and attempted incursions into our military bases, illicit surveillance of those bases, plus illicit surveillance of our infrastructure. So those networks, I think, are ready to strike. And that, to me, would be the single greatest threat.
Would a Chinese cell strike on American soil, and would China be ready for the repercussions?
Maybe not, but maybe they're desperate. You know, right now we have a China where the Communist Party is in disarray. We have Xi Jinping losing power. He's certainly lost control of the military. He's got problems in the civilian leadership. We're seeing all of these signs. And so desperate people do desperate things. So the answer to your question is they might do anything because their threshold of risk, I believe, is a lot lower than we think it is.
That's amazing. That's something we have to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Now, in the weeks leading to the eventual attack by the U.S. on Iran, there were reports of these mysterious flights between China and Iran. It seems that we don't have a lot of information. What do you think that those flights were about?
Well, there's disagreement whether those flights actually did land in Iranian airspace. But the point is, we know that, people were saying, oh, they're bringing in weapons. But we know that Iran already has those weapons. And so, when you turn off your transponder, you're up to no good. Yeah. So this is going to be an issue. We don't know exactly what those planes were doing, but clearly there was something that was nefarious going on. And eventually we will find out.
Yeah. We're learning more and more about China's warfare on our own soil. All right, we know about COVID-19. We know about the scientists that snuck in the pathogens recently. Kash Patel has given us a whole nother body of evidence that China had a plot to disrupt the 2020 election, try to get mail-in ballots from Chinese citizens in Americans' names using fake IDs to get Joe Biden to be president. That got swept under the rug. Is it still important to get to that bottom of that now, 5 years later?
Oh, absolutely, because this goes to the core of democracy. Somebody could not print ballots, which is also another allegation that's occurred. And they certainly couldn't produce fake IDs and export them to the United States without the knowledge of the Communist Party because it runs a near total surveillance state.
Right.
And we also have other disturbing reports of China sending in counterfeit currency in 2020, automatic weapons parts. There's just so much that went on. And there's that report from Radio Free Asia which said that in 2020, an intelligence unit of the People's Liberation Army based themselves in the now closed Houston consulate. And there they used big data to identify Americans likely to participate in violent protests. And then they sent them, quote unquote, tailor-made videos on how to riot. And we learned from related reporting guys that it was TikToks that were used for these videos. So this was a federal crime, of course, but this is also an act of war.
Yeah,
it is.
Very different world that we live in today. What is China's end game with its Belt and Road Initiative, and how successful do you think that they have been really at weaponizing economic dependence, for political leverage?
Well, they certainly have weaponized their economic relations, trade and investment with countries. With Belt and Road, in our own hemisphere, there's 31 Chinese ports that either are in operation or now being constructed, including the megaport of Chancay in Peru. the reason here we got to be worried about is that China is tying these countries to itself in our region, but also that China could turn these into military bases, which is what it's done in Asia with some of these Belt and Road projects. And one of these Belt and Road projects is within 90 miles of the Florida coast. It's in Freeport in the Bahamas. So we don't want the Chinese Navy 90 miles from Florida.
That's amazing. One of the places that there's growing evidence of Chinese involvement is in South Korea, certainly with the election, the impeachments, the unrest there. Tell us the latest of what you know. I know you got a big news conference tomorrow, but how much meddling was China involved in with the South Korean elections?
I think China was involved in the elections that were just took place on June 3. But also, they've been involved quite some time, going back to at least 2020 in the elections. There is evidence that Chinese nationals, people who were not South Korean nationals, were actually voting, because these guys were bragging online that they did it.
Yeah.
Plus, also, we know a lot of other evidence of Beijing's interference in those South Korean elections. Those elections were marred by widespread fraud. And we're going to talk about it tomorrow at the National Press Club at 11 o'clock.
That's a big moment. We're going to be covering it live here at Just the News. That's such an important one. Gordon, all you've done, you sounded the siren long before other people saw this threat from China. We're so lucky to have you in this country as one of our leading experts. And we have a lot of vigilance ahead of us, but I do appreciate that you're here all the time to give it to us.
Well, I really appreciate to talk to you. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon.
Yeah,
Great to see
amazing expert on all this stuff.
Sure is.
All right, folks, Rebecca and I are going to take a quick break. We got one more segment to go. Before we do, I have a good idea for you. Go over to amac.us/justnews, because you can get, for as little as $12 a year, you can become a member like me, join AMAC, get their award-winning magazine, valuable discounts, and access to free resources. But more importantly, you'll be part of a movement committing to protecting the values that made America great: faith, family, and freedom. Make sure you go to amac.us/justnews, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes. Welcome back, America, to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, Vigilant for Peace Abroad and Terror at Home. It's all brought to you by AMAC, our good friends at the Association of Mature American Citizens. It's time now to bring back my amazing co-host for the evening, AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber. And now we're going to be joined by AMAC's national spokesperson, the former Assistant Secretary of State and great friend of this show. He's also the candidate for governor in Maine, Bobby Charles. Bobby, welcome back, buddy.
Great to see you both, Rebecca and John. Awesome.
We love having you on. Today was an extraordinary day. There's been 24 hours of silence and no violence in the Middle East. The European nations committed to a 5% GDP investment in their own security in NATO. And the world just feels a lot more secure than it was 5 months ago. Rebecca opened the show saying that. Your thoughts on what President Trump has already achieved in the first part of his presidency?
You know, John and Rebecca, I start to run out of words, which is hard for me. I think this president is epic. What he's done here is tantamount to what Reagan did when he brought down the Soviet Union. What he's done is he has silenced arguably what was going to be one of the most predatory, obviously terrorist and nuclear armed states in the world. He's brought them to their knees. And he's commanded the respect of the entire world, and I would include Russia and China in that, by force of his courage and his boldness and his willingness to know right from wrong, which is exactly what Reagan did. He knew right from wrong, and then he acted on right. And no matter how many times people told him he was wrong, he said, I know right from wrong. I'm going to do it. And what Donald Trump did, and by the way, let us not forget our American military at his behest. An extraordinary group of courageous young Americans were behind this, from the operational security and the intelligence planning to the operation itself and the hot wash. I mean, this is an extraordinary moment, performance by an extraordinary group of young Americans who have trust and faith in a president who is garnering not just trust and faith of Americans, but the trust and faith of the world.
Thank you, Bobby. You know, we see a lot of people on the left that are complaining that Trump did not get the required congressional approval. What legal authority really supports the president's ability to carry out such a strike?
Yeah, so this was a president who was putting an end to an urgent problem. Understand that Iran had moved from 20 to 60% enrichment and had doubled the amount of enriched uranium they had, and were in a hot war already with Israel, one of our closest allies, if not our closest ally in the world. This was a surgical strike, not a going to war. If you need to, an all-out war in which we're going to put ground troops down and we're going to be in combat over an extended period, a predictable period of time, would require a congressional declaration of war. That's not what this is. This was a surgical strike tantamount to what Ronald Reagan did in October of 1987 and in April of 1988, in which he, in an operation called Nimble Archer, destroyed half of Iran's navy. He did that because Iran was being an aggressor. Iran was being an aggressor here and had been, frankly, through their surrogates since October 7. Donald Trump just basically said, you know what? We're not going to let you, a radical, reckless, inhumane, horrifyingly inhumane country, get control of nuclear weapons. And you can come and discipline me later if you want, but the bottom line is I'm not going to let that kind of tragedy befall the globe or the Middle East or Europe or Israel. And so, you know what? This was not war. This was a surgical strike that was spectacularly effective.
So, Bobby, how do you really see this playing out? How does this strike really impact U.S. relations with so many other key players in the region, like Saudi Arabia and Turkey?
Good question. So I would say this has first order, second order, and third order effects. The first order effect is it's going to put a swift end to the belligerence of Iran in the Middle East. They'll still have talk, but they won't have the weapons to back it up. And that will put Israel in a better position and actually will open the door across the entire Arab world, 22 countries if you include Israel, to a wider peace, perhaps an expansion of the Abraham Accords and a greater first order effect right there in the Middle East. The second effect, I think, is that allies who are not, I'm talking about our closer allies and even our secondary allies will recognize people like Saudi Arabia, people like Turkey, even though Turkey is a NATO member. They have a large Muslim population, and of course Saudi Arabia is Sunni, not Shia. So a lot of the Middle East, I think, is going to, as a second order effect, say, you know what? Donald Trump shows us that there is a way to silence evil, and let's follow him. You know, walk softly and carry a big stick is what Donald Trump does. Every once in a while, he uses the big stick, and then a bunch of people line up behind him. I think that's going to happen again here in spades. And then big picture, the third order effect, I think China in particular, but China and Russia have to be sitting back in their respective, well, call them politburos, and saying, my God, this is guys like Reagan. Reagan said we'd end up on the ash heap of history. That's what he said to the Soviets, and Putin was there when that happened. When he speaks, he means what he says. He does what he says he's going to do. The United States is truly the leader of the free world, and arguably they ought to, and China ought to, think hard about whether they want to be an aggressor or whether they want to perhaps begin to think in terms of a longer range, more constructive relationship with us.
Yeah, hence the word epic that you used at the beginning is an epic downstream effect of what's already occurred in the last few days. Bobby, I want to turn inward to the United States. There are lots of illegal aliens roaming around that we don't know who they are. We know there are Hezbollah cells here. We know there are some Chinese military cells here. Tell us what we all should be vigilant for over the next few months. We've got about 45 seconds left.
Yeah, the nutshell version, John, is there are sleeper cells in this country and in this hemisphere, and they are, as you mentioned, often tied to Hezbollah, which of course is tied to Iran. I think it doesn't mean we panic or anything like that. Iran is not going to activate those cells, or they're going to get hit again. So at the end of the day, we just have to be vigilant. There could be individual strikes on bases, military bases, et cetera, from within. But I just think we have to be vigilant, like we were after 9/11, and like we should always be.
That's a good word, vigilance. Bobby, as always, we always appreciate your insights, your great wisdom, and we're looking forward to that great race in Maine where you're running for governor. Good to have you on tonight.
Grateful to both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, what a great conversation.
Thanks,
as
Bobby.
always. Rebecca, what a show. I can't believe we're out of time, but what a great conversation.
Wonderful. Great
Yeah.
lineup of guests.
Just
Really good stuff. Thank
So much
you.
to think about. All right, folks, last call tonight before we call it a night. Head out to amac.us/justnews. Go be a member like me and Rebecca. Go get an incredible offer. $12 a year. You can't get anything for $12 anymore. Go do that now. Join me. You will be happy. You'll have rewarded yourself with something great. Go to amac.us/justnews right now. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with regular program. Until then, God bless. Have a good night.